Hello, my name is Justin the and I'm here today with
Will Sloan.
And you're listening to the Important Cinema Club. And this week, we're selling out, talking about topics that everyone has talked about.
That's right. It's Big Sember. Last week, I announced it as Big Dember, and there was
I actually said it recently to Emily. I was like, is it Big Sember or Big Dember?
There was a confusion in my head because December starts with a D, and also I think Big Dember sounds funnier.
Yes.
But it's actually Big Sember.
Oh, really? Will there be Big Sember, Big Dember factions that split up?
I hope so.
Yeah.
Write in. Let us know which one you are. So in Big Sember, we're talking about big subjects. Things you've heard of, things you know, things you love.
And things that maybe, like today's subject, have been covered ad nauseum. And because of that, I've done something I've never done for the show. I did no research.
Oh.
And you know why? Why would I even walk into the muck of trying to describe Star Wars or give dates? Is there any other franchise in the world that has been more kind of, researched and cataloged
and debated?
Yes.
Did Greedo shoot first?
Endlessly. So the way that I want to approach this is we're going to talk about the movies, but we're going to come to it from like a personal perspective, speaking from our kind of like experiences or even what we take from the films today.
From the heart. And yeah, I also did no research. Frankly, I think it was heroic of me to even watch the movies.
I saw you watched all three of them.
I watched all three of them because, look, I take my job that seriously. But listen, we've all seen these movies.
Multiple times, probably.
And did I really gain anything from the experience of watching them again?
No, probably not.
Probably not. They were exactly what I thought they were. They were exactly what I remember. They're exactly the movies I've seen a million times.
Well, I haven't seen these Star Wars films maybe in a decade, I think. The last one was probably Empire Strikes Back, when someone played a 35mm print for their birthday. And even when I was watching it at that time, I was like, oh man, I've seen this so many times. So I will say that reviewing it this week, it felt a little fresher as well.
I also want to say that we are both fortunate because we own a great bootleg Blu-ray set.
Where is it? People have emailed me being like, where can I get it? Even though we don't condone of it because it's a bootleg, of course.
I condone it. It's fine. So you can get it at sloppysecondsales.com. There are a number of other websites where you can get it.
I would also recommend check archive.org. Every now and then someone posts the kind of scans of Star Wars prints that like there is a fan community out there. It's very easy to find that people have like dedicated their life to getting the best version of these Star Wars films, to the point that I was looking at their forums recently and it said, we want to buy a film scanner just for Star Wars, these three related things. And this is my big issue with Star Wars is it doesn't need to dominate pop culture as much as it does right now.
Well, yes, absolutely. So, I mean, the reason why I recommend watching them on these Grindhouse scans, which I said sloppyseconds.com, you can also get them at Movies R USA. maybe people listening to this 10 or 15 or 100 years in the future will search those websites
and they'll still be up, right?
Yeah, I'm sure. But I recommend watching them in these Grindhouse versions because, there are some people, there have been these experiments to try to create, what did Star Wars look like exactly when it played on opening night in 1977.
If you look at some of those scans, there's like 14 audio tracks because there's like, the original mono one, a stereo one, the 70mm track that George Lucas famously went back and like re-edited while it was still in theatrical distribution.
Because from opening day in 1977 to now, there have been so many different alterations. Everybody knows that in 1997, there were the special editions, which have become sort of the default version with, a few new surprises, I think it was marketed as.
I mean, but for us, I think we're more defined by the VHS releases, right? The THX approved ones.
So in 95 or 96, I'm not quite sure when, there was a final release of Star Wars in its original form. And then there was the special edition that had a bunch of new scenes and enhanced special effects.
Yeah, we don't care about that though.
But the THX edition, it was on VHS, and there was an interview at the beginning between George Lucas and Leonard Maltin.
I could not hit that fast forward button faster.
Get it out of here. Yeah. Get it out of here. And yet,
I saw the beginning of that interview so many times.
Hi, I'm Leonard Maltin. Doesn't it feel incomplete a little bit now without Leonard Maltin?
I would agree.
Just like how Tim Burton's Batman feels incomplete without the Diet Coke commercial with Alfred the Butler.
Did that begin on the VHS?
Yeah. Hello, Gotham Corner Store. We seem to be down to our last Diet Coke.
Then it cuts to the Batmobile like, da,
A gentleman is on his way. Just look for the black car.
But we can only speak from our perspective. You know, youngings listen to this. They're like, that is so foreign to me, having to take the VHS out and put it into the rewinder.
And probably blowing it like you would an N64 cartridge.
And that's why you'd have to see Leonard Maltin every time, because it had to go all the way back to the beginning.
Rewinding a movie, can you believe that? So those are a couple of different versions, but ever since 1977, George Lucas and Fox and Disney presumably have tinkered with it in a million ways, given it little facelifts, little shots of Botox, little sound effects here and there to make it look like a modern movie.
It's done. It's not a modern movie. Stop it. All of you to jail.
And
to
so
jail
that's
for what
why
you've done.
the only version I recommend are these grindhouse prints on sloppysecondfilms.com, whatever the fuck it's called, where they took old 35 millimeter prints from the time, well-loved, battered 35 millimeter prints, and scanned them and did no restoration whatsoever. And you can see what it would look like if you were seeing this movie 7 weeks into its run.
I mean, let's be honest, Sloppy Seconds definitely did not do that. They probably took somebody else's thing.
Somebody did.
Yeah, somebody did.
And look, whoever did it also didn't own it. So it's fine.
Yeah, you know, all these people are heroes because this is the way the movie should be watched. It is something that is in amber, and while it continues to be, you know, watched and enjoyed, it does not need to be updated, especially if those previous versions are mercilessly just taken away.
And I also think this is the only version of the movie that I want to watch because what do we know about Star Wars? What do we know about its place in film history?
It's way too dominant.
It's way too dominant. And the myth is, at least, that you had 10 years of Easy Riders and Taxi Drivers and Chinatowns and Straw Dogses.
And George Lucas was in that circle of new Hollywood filmmakers.
Right.
He was at that beach house watching the topless Margaret Kidder just lay down and suntan.
That's right. He was there with...
He was like, oh boy.
Brian De Palma and all those fucking guys.
No drugs were being done, of course.
Francis Coppola, the whole gang. And he was, in fact, Francis Coppola's protege, was he not?
Mm-hmm. He was indeed.
And Francis Coppola has said in many interviews, like, oh, you know, it's too bad Star Wars came along. He had so much to give us.
I mean, Brian De Palma did a rewrite on the opening crawl, didn't he?
Is that true? I didn't know that.
I believe, because when Lucas showed the rough cut and he had that like World War II footage in place of some of the special effects, his friends were not fans of it. So,
well, I mean, there's the famous story that like he screened the movie for all those guys, for like Coppola and De Palma and all those guys, and they all like laughed at it.
Yeah, exactly.
They thought it was shit, and well, he's laughing all the way to the bank now.
Yeah, with no friends in a gigantic library.
Xanadu. Yeah. So what do we know about its place in the culture? There was that great flowering of interesting and experimental and very difficult sometimes American films, movies that took American cinema to a new level of artistry.
I love the Monkees. There's a feature film with them in it.
Yeah.
What the hell is this?
Yeah, and audiences were starting to get just a little bit tired of getting bummed out every time they went to the movies.
They're like, can't we get that Dr. Doolittle that speaks to animals? Bring him back, please.
Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown. Why does it have to be Chinatown all the time? Why can't it be a galaxy far, far away? And so George Lucas came in and made a movie where the novelty was, hey, you remember those old adventure serials that you used to love as a kid? Presumably. He wasn't a kid when those came out.
No.
Maybe he saw them on TV. But those old Flash Gordon, low-budget serials, and it's like, what if we did that sort of thing with state-of-the-art technology, great special effects, top flight talent in front of and behind the camera, and also what if it had no greater depth than those original serials?
Well,
that may be a little
I have a
overstating
little
the
book
case.
here called The Secrets of Star Wars that goes through every draft before Star Wars actually came to the screen.
Yeah, okay, maybe I'm overstating the case a bit, but what I do find with, especially when you see like the special edition or the version of Star Wars that's playing on Disney Plus right now is, yes, it sort of looks like a movie from the 70s, but it tells you nothing about the 70s. Most big franchise movies, if you watch any Batman movie, any Planet of the Apes movie, any, I don't know, a lot of franchise movies at least. I don't want to keep overstating the case. But if you watch a lot of franchise movies, they will tell you something about the times they're made. Not Star Wars. It's timeless, and that can be either a good or bad thing depending on your perspective. It's vacuum sealed. It's Teflon.
And wait a minute, I'm looking here at Return of the Jedi, and aren't the little furry creatures supposed to be representatives of the Norse Vietnamese?
Oh, that's right. So this is actually something that I do. Well, also like the rebels in the first movie, according to George Lucas, they're, Luke and Leia and Han, they're the Viet Cong.
Yeah, that's the way that he viewed it. And if you look at what he was working on before that, let's not forget the original version of Apocalypse Now, where George Lucas was like, we're just going to go to Vietnam, we're just going to shoot it this way, we're going to do it guerrilla style.
But I also want to say, in no real meaningful sense of the Viet Cong, because what is Darth Vader in that first movie? He is a bad guy.
Yeah, a lackey.
In fact, he's telling people to come to the dark side. It's literally called the dark side. Okay, this is the level of moral nuance we're talking about.
But at the same time, I think that you're giving Star Wars a little bit of a disservice because it feels lived in and present in a way that people were not able to connect with. For example, the classic serials, who those were hermetically sealed in a way that was false and cheap and phony that children enjoyed. But Star Wars was, Lucas going in with his love for that and giving it a texture and a dirtiness and a lived in feel that kind of brought people in and allowed them to stay there. The bars closed and you could not leave.
Well, and maybe the best scene in A New Hope is when they go to the canteen, which there's nothing I can say about this movie that hasn't been said by a million people, so I'm just going to say it anyway. Feels like, oh, look at all these characters. All these characters could have their own story.
They do right
they
here
do now.
When I was a kid and I read Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina book, which every character gets a little short story and there's a picture of them over it.
Yeah, there you go.
Because that's what happens when there's a dominant, thing that's all you want is the thing that you like, and it envelops everything.
And then of course they meet Han Solo there, and he says something like, "You don't know the Millennium Falcon? Well, it did the Kessel Run and not in 12 parsecs."
Don't worry. The son of Lawrence Kasdan is going to figure out, even though that parsecs are a unit of measurement, not a measurement of time.
There I am. I'm an audience member in 1977, and I'm like, hold up, pause it.
Yeah.
What was the Kessel Run? I hope in 40 years there's a movie that tells me this.
Or many novelizations and graphic novels that would explain this kind of stuff, mostly published by Marvel and Dark Horse. But what's really great about that scene is when you watch it in the original version, there are just some shitty ass monsters that were cobbled together by Rick Baker in reshoots. But when they did the special editions, they moved all of those hey, there's that crappy looking but lovable werewolf guy, and we're just gonna get rid of them, and because we want it to be like everything is important in some way.
Well, how about in the special edition in Return of the Jedi? Not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but at Jabba the Hutt's palace, his slave dungeon,
CGI,
that awful CGI band. My God, the special editions. I don't know. I've never encountered anybody who likes them.
Oh, if you look, didn't I send you those comments from the Internet Archive?
That's the first one I've ever seen in my life.
Where the person is like,
anyone.
No one's asking for the original versions. The special edition is selling like hotcakes, so please stop posting this.
Of course it's selling like hotcakes.
Because there's nothing else.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the only choice that you have.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe people who grew up with a special edition don't want, because I had totally forgotten that in Return of the Jedi, that music number is there, but it's just a big Muppet, singing and dancing. It rules.
In the special edition, it's nightmarish. And all the special editions, the 1997 special effects are just like every 15 minutes you're just assaulted
Sorry, I'm making
by
Jabba sound as he walks over his tail. Did I watch those making ofs where they're like, we needed to figure out how Han would, turn around Jabba, because when we shot it originally for A New Hope, it was a human being.
Right.
But now we know what he looks like. But we figured out by just lifting him up, he's stepping on his tail. And then you have Jabba react, and you look at it in the movie it looks like crap. It just doesn't work.
It absolutely looks like crap. And also in A New Hope, Jabba the Hutt is supposedly he's just up and about, he's walking around, whereas by the time you get to Return of the Jedi, just a mere few years later, he's the whale,
Yeah, that's right. He let himself go.
All right, I feel like we're getting lost in the weeds of nitpicking stupid bullshit.
Let's talk about A New Hope. The plot is in a galaxy far, far away.
Yeah, you got Luke, and he's just trying to get some power converters.
I want to go to Tashi to get my power converters.
Yeah.
Now, have you seen the deleted scenes of him talking to his friends and stuff like that?
Yes, I have actually.
Look how big nerds we are of this that we have seen.
It's funny. I don't even really like Star Wars, but I've seen it a million times.
For the record, I love these Star Wars movies.
Yeah.
I watched the first one, I was like, oh yeah, this is good.
Okay, here's my relationship with Star Wars.
Yeah.
When I was 5 years old, no, maybe 6 years old, I remember my dad told me, you've got to watch Star Wars, and the first one was rented out.
Now, did your dad like Star Wars?
Yeah.
Okay.
Everyone likes Star Wars. So, but he knew that I would love it. And so the first one was rented out. So the first one I watched was Empire Strikes Back.
Now that is.
And I remember my dad pointing to Darth Vader on the back of the box and said, "That's Darth Vader. He's really evil."
So did it scare you?
Well, that was Dad explaining a movie to a child.
Okay.
So I watched Empire Strikes Back. Didn't take too long to figure out what was what. Loved it. It was like the coolest shit I'd ever seen. So cool. I still remember watching it. I still remember.
What is this magic pixie dust that Star Wars has for kids?
I don't know.
I
don't
remember
know.
being at someone's house, and it was like a mother's coworker's son, and Star Wars was just playing on the television, and it was the end. And I was like, what is this? I had no concept of Star Wars, and I wanted then to know everything about it.
So I'm trying to think about how I felt when I was a kid. And I guess, first of all, you've got, like we said before, a big world with a lot of really cool creatures and stuff that I guess when you're a kid light up your imagination. You see that Mos Eisley cantina and you see all those things and you get fixated on all those things. Also, Mark Hamill, very childlike.
I mean, I never liked Mark Hamill as a kid.
Oh, I loved Mark Hamill as a
Really?
kid. I don't love him now.
No. Let's look at his social media account.
Yeah,
Oh, no.
he's also lame and a loser in
Yeah.
real life. But in the movie, it's like he's like you. He's your surrogate. He's young. He's out of his depth. Baby faced. Well, in the first one, he's baby faced.
There was an accident
Yeah.
afterwards, unfortunately.
Yeah. And then you've got Han Solo, who is like the older brother. And
The
he's
cool guy.
Really cool. And he's also like a little bit out of your league to hang out with.
You know, rewatching A New Hope this time, I was almost overwhelmed by all the stuff I could look in the frame and be like, whoa, look at that creature in the back, or look at that over there. Even them just like walking through shots.
Yeah, I get that. I get that.
And watching it as well, I noticed like, oh, I bet at the beginning when R2-D2, he sets his rollers down to move forward, and in the theatrical cut, there's a jump cut. I bet that's fixed in the special edition. Of course it is.
Of course.
Boo, get out of here.
I hate it.
I hate it so much.
Okay, and just getting back to those like Grindhouse Blu-rays that I highly recommend, it's like I love them because they situate the movie in the 70s. It's not timeless anymore. I don't like the timeless feeling.
I don't like the timeless feeling either.
I want it to feel like a 70s sci-fi movie, a state-of-the-art 70s sci-fi movie. I love seeing like little imperfections. I love seeing what the matte paintings really look like.
Are they just terrified that when kids will see it, they will disconnect from it
Yes.
because it's different? But
Yes.
Will they? I don't think they
so.
will. Yeah, because even if you watch that special edition, it does not look like a movie that was made today.
I remember absolutely. In fact, I think the special editions do a disservice to it because
Oh, they do?
Well, okay. Yeah. They do, believe it or not. But they really do a disservice to it because they're saying like, okay, well, these are modern movies. These are viable entertainments that can compete with Marvel and that sort of shit. Like whatever the big blockbusters are right now on those terms. And they can't. I think they're better than a lot of those Marvel movies, but they're better in the context of being 70s movies.
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be like a competition, because if you show
Right.
it to a 5-year-old, they do not have, probably the media acumen to tell the difference between all this stuff.
But if you show it to me, I'm looking at a movie that's been scrubbed and airbrushed to look like it came out today, and it obviously didn't come out today.
Yeah,
And
so there's
it
a
feels-
cognitive dissonance there.
Yeah, and
Like,
it feels bad, and it's like if you're telling me this came out today, then it doesn't. It looks like a 70s movie, and it doesn't feel right.
So I was talking about Will before we recorded that, the first Star Wars, it's slow. It takes a long time to get going. I've always felt that way. Watching it this time, I was fine because it's kind of like visiting an old friend or going back to an old house and being like, oh, wow, it's bigger than I thought it was.
Yeah.
Instead of being like, it's tiny and bad and I don't like it, which is usually how I think about Star Wars all the time because it's all consuming.
But what about Empire Strikes Back?
As a kid, I probably at one point said, well, Empire Strikes Back is my favorite because it's the dark one. To be honest, it was probably Return of the Jedi because I like Jabba's palace a lot and I like the Ewoks. Watching Empire Strikes Back now, it definitely feels like the middle part of a chapter, and I'm always surprised that very little happens in the movie. That you have the Battle of Hoth at the beginning, and then you have, they split up. He goes to see Yoda, Luke does. Can I just say, Yoda is awesome.
I love Yoda. No, he's the best character in all these.
And he is so animated, he feels alive. And then when you watch him in the prequels, he's so boring.
I knew
and he
it-
does nothing.
I knew we were going to talk about this because you see that Yoda puppet when the Yoda puppet makes a facial expression,
Yeah.
it means something.
Yeah.
It carries weight.
And he, is alive and he's playful. And at first he's doing it as a gag, hitting R2-D2.
I love it. And he's
But-
physical.
Yeah.
He has texture.
But he also has that little bit of playfulness as you go along. But just like Star Wars, George Lucas felt, oh, well, Yoda is serious. He's a master, not allowed to have any fun. And it's like, why did you make Star Wars? It's this weight that's just weighing on George Lucas, sucking all the fun that, like, oh, if I was a kid, I'd want to make a serial adventure as well. Just tossing off like, oh, yeah, the Clone Wars in the first Star Wars. You don't know what it is. Doesn't mean anything. Maybe you want to know more, but that's the magic of it. You don't need to know those things.
Also, if you're talking about which Yoda looks more realistic, which I think is the lamest lens through which you could view this sort of thing.
Let me look at the commercial where they go, Yoda man, and then look at the Yoda in Empire Strikes Back, and
the Yoda in Empire Strikes Back looks like he's there, you know, and you buy him, you buy into the reality in the same way that you do with the Muppets, you know, because like there are human hands manipulating this thing.
Yeah, Frank Oz is under there, like doing Yoda, moving him around, making him feel alive with the dialogue.
He moves like a person, you know, in his way.
Someone's jumping in now. It's like, well, Frank Oz actually didn't really puppet
Maybe he
Yoda.
was remote controlled. I don't know.
It doesn't matter.
Fuck it.
You know what we're talking about. What do you think of Empire Strikes Back?
I like it. It's definitely my favorite of the three. I mean, with all of the Star Wars movies, I honestly run up against like a certain feeling of like, it's never about anything more than just what it's about.
But does it need to be about that?
Well, it's like if we're talking about like, are these movies in sort of the elite tier? Are these movies more? Are these movies just like fun escapist stuff? Yeah. And if they are, they're great. They're great on those terms. But if they are like supposed to be your favorite movie ever, if they're supposed to be in that like, these are some of the best movies of the 70s, which people obsess over these things.
So they have to mean something in a grander scale?
All I know is that when I watch, they don't have to.
Okay.
This is purely subjective.
Because I'm looking at Batman Returns over here, and
I love the characters in Batman Returns.
But you don't love the characters in Star Wars?
I think they're a little simple. I don't know. I think there's not a lot for me to grasp onto. There aren't a lot of...
but we're talking about you, though, because clearly other people have been able to grasp onto them and hold them in a death grip, looking back at the joy they felt as a child, hoping that new Star Wars material will give them those things.
And good for those people. It's like I watch these movies and they're just... Everything about the characters and their relationships and their struggles is just so kind of basic, right down to the fact that the villains are just...
Well, I would make the argument that, you know, Will loves Batman Returns. He loves talking about Batman Returns. He is not obsessed with Batman. Like you are not reading new Batman comics. You're not like you want to see Michael Keaton play Batman.
I do want to keep Batman like in a good like proportion.
Yes. I mean, when I was a kid, I loved all the Star Wars stuff, and I was in a place growing up where it wasn't completely dominant, but it was dominant enough that there was seemingly endless materials that I could explore if I wanted to.
I had all sorts of toys. I had all sorts of, you know, video games, Shadows of the Emperor, that's thing.
Shadows of the Empire, when you what's the name of like Dax something? Rendar?
Yeah, that's right. That had its own character.
Reading my Nintendo Power magazine to see the comic of like what actually happened to Dax.
I mean, I did love these movies when I was a kid.
God, I'm thinking back of like reading like youth novels of like Jedi Academy. What's going to happen to the twins of Han and Leia?
Right. Okay. So you went deep into the
that was very present in my young life.
I didn't get that deep into it, but Star Wars was definitely a major presence in my life from like 1996 to 1999 or so. And as I said, as I was watching Empire Strikes Back again, I was remembering the feelings that I had when I saw it for the first time. I was remembering how engrossed I was remembering seeing those scenes for the first time and remembering that engrossed feeling that I had.
You know, for all of the kind of wonder that I got of watching A New Hope this time, when I watched Empire Strikes Back, I felt like the ending was so kind of like, hey, yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Like the big like Luke scene where he does not say, Luke, I'm your father. That is just the way that we've perceived it. That line is never spoken in the film.
What does he say? He says, no, I am your father.
But before he says Luke like 30 times.
Right.
So that's why people make that association.
Play it again, Sam.
Yeah, exactly. And we've seen that clip like in a million AFI things for some reason or another. And so maybe that's why it's just drilled into my brain. So it's like a mixture of like Empire left me a little bit colder because they're on the planet Hoth than I expected. While the first one, I was like, oh, there's more to explore there. And I think it's because I didn't watch the first one that many times as a kid, that if I'm going to the VHS at my dad's house, he's the one who had him on tape, I was reaching for Empire or Jedi as the ones that I wanted to watch, where the adventure's already going. Instead of like, all right, we got to go get Ben Solo, and then he's got to watch this thing, and then we go to the bar, and then we, you know, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. I mean, I think Empire Strikes Back has, for me right now, the most most compelling, emotional stuff in it. I think some of the action set pieces are really cool. Like the final lightsaber fight between Darth and Luke is beautifully choreographed and lit and executed.
When I was getting into Hong Kong movies, I would look back at these Star Wars films and be like, Pasha. They're not like Ching Su Tung choreographed films. Now I watch them and I'm like, yeah, these are great. There's a reason people like them. They don't feel like, even Obi-Wan and Darth Vader going at it in the first one, it's really enjoyable. Did you know that George Lucas wanted to add like CGI stunt doubles in that scene and have him doing like flips and shit?
Oh no.
And then like people talked him out of it. Like, you can't do that that's going too far, because George Lucas was a big fan of Hong Kong cinema. And he's like, I want to bring some of that Hong Kong flavor to the original Star Wars.
Oh no.
George, how about you just make another movie?
Isn't it incredible? You watch these original Star Wars movies and certain of the most iconic scenes. I mean, in A New Hope, it's the scene of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader having a lightsaber fight is so not action packed. Or then there's the scene that was in every trailer of Luke and Leia just jumping over a gorge.
And it's like, yes, the peak of excitement.
And the thing is,
where did he get that grappling hook?
Right.
I'm sure there's an 8-volume novel series I could read about the history of the grappling hook.
It was in his utility belt.
Yes, like Batman.
But I mean, those scenes which are so not action packed do like have such
a punch, or like it works.
And even when you watch them now, they do.
What is that magic pixie dust though? Like, how did all those elements come together? Now, did I look into Star Wars ripoffs because I was like this week being like, why was no one able to kind of capture that fun of it? Like, if you look at, even something like Flash Gordon, which I like, but is more campy and over the top, or, ripoffs like, for example, Roger Corman, Battle Beyond the Stars, which a lot of people like.
Well, I think when you watch A New Hope, it seems like this very huge, expansive world, and it is, but really, the palette of it is actually quite limited. There's a dichotomy through the whole movie between steel and sand, basically. And so the whole thing has to work within those two modes. And then in addition to that, all of the characters, I mean, it's a very earnest movie, and all the characters have basically like a couple of really iconic registers. So there's a great expanse to the vision, but there's also an incredible focus to the vision that allows you to, like, some of the Star Wars ripoffs seem very arbitrary. They seem very uncontrolled and undisciplined, which Star Wars is disciplined.
And I would make the argument that a lot of the people making those films, except for maybe Luigi Cozzi when he made Star Crash, don't really like these things that much, that they're making them because they think that's what audiences want. When Star Wars is infused by George Lucas and everybody working on the team, like going towards a clear goal and wanting to do it in a way that honestly had never really been achieved. Like, you watch that final trench run in A New Hope and it's still exciting. Like, the things look like they're moving fast. And when you watch something like that and you think about now, every time you see that, it's like, it's bad now though. Like, why does it feel like there's speed and motion in these, they're, enhanced optical effects versus like, now that you have ultimate control over everything.
Also, the incredible simplicity of Star Wars, which is something that I just complained about a minute ago, is one of the reasons why it's so effective too, because it's like you've got your good guys, your bad guys, and the good guys have a very clear goal.
Well, Will, you need to watch up to season 7 of the Clone Wars when they finally introduce characters that maybe there is a place between the dark and the light side.
Well, and in fairness, I mean, Luke does find himself tempted by the dark, doesn't he? Whatever the dark side is.
Is there an argument between that maybe Luke? Oh God, I don't want to make any arguments about Star Wars. This is like saying stuff about the Bible, like it has been covered ad nauseum.
Hey, how about I proffer one of my theories? Okay,
go with it.
This is something I was developing as I was watching it now. You know how Luke, after Obi-Wan Kenobi dies, is frequently revisited by the ghost of Obi-Wan.
Yeah, and you want to know, like, what about his goddamn aunt and uncle that he just witnessed burnt alive?
Well, yeah, and you think, well, obviously, people who have the Force, people who have like a particular Force power, enough midichlorians or whatever.
Oh yeah,
like they can. Let's forget that. For the sake of argument, midichlorians do not exist. Certain Force rich people are able to visit you from beyond the grave, but actually, I think they're figments of his imagination.
Really?
I think this is my this is my new theory.
Okay.
And then you can tell me if this has already been said.
So do you think Luke Skywalker in it's Return of the Jedi, where Alec Guinness shows up and he's like, "Oh, I'm tired," and he sits on a log?
Oh man, there's never been a more phoned in performance than that. Alec Guinness, who already hates this shit.
Oh, he
hated it when he was moving in the first one.
Yep, that's right. I'm gonna sit down on a log and you can't make me not do that. So
yeah. So I think think in that first one, when Obi-Wan says, Darth, if you kill me, I'll become more powerful than you can imagine. He's not saying that literally. He's saying, I become a martyr. I become an idea.
I have a little movie for you called The Last Jedi, where that's literally what it's about at the end of the movie, where at the end when Luke Skywalker sacrifices himself, he's only doing it because he knows he will become an idea that other people can then, strive towards.
And so now my theory is that whole last act of The Last Jedi, where Adam Driver is firing at him and everything, that's all taking place in Adam Driver's imagination. Okay?
Sorry, Will.
It's not.
This is the fan theory of like, maybe Ferris Bueller is just a creation of that other guy.
Listen, here I am watching Star Wars and I'm trying to think of something interesting or new to say about it. And so I come up with this stupid bullshit.
Yeah.
But no, listen, it's like in Return of the Jedi when Luke visits Yoda and says, is it true? Is he really my father? And Yoda says, your father, he is, or whatever. And then he dies. And then he's visited by Obi-Wan. He's not really talking Obi-Wan. He's not really talking Obi-Wan's ghost. That's him dealing internally with, why did Obi-Wan lie to me? And did he lie to me? And Obi-Wan says, well, read the fine print from a certain perspective. You could argue that I kind of, sort of...
I think he actually says that. He's like,
from some perspectives.
Yeah, I didn't really lie.
Yeah, it's not as if George Lucas was making this shit up as he went along, no.
Oh, no. George Lucas had all of these 6 films planned out perfectly.
And that's why in part 4, there's a love triangle with a guy and his sister.
Yeah, and that everybody on the cast, when they were revealed in Return of the Jedi that Luke and Leia were sisters, they went like, wait, what? Are you just doing this because you're trying to get another twist after the I am your father bit in the first one? Can we also talk about, it sucks that the world is so small in these movies, mostly because they've existed so long and that grip is not let go of it.
Man, it's so ridiculous.
We're getting an Obi-Wan show to see what he did on the planet Tatooine. That'll be fun.
The whole point was he did nothing.
Yeah, what did he do? Oh, he went and saved Leia?
No,
Leia?
No, he didn't. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
No, thank you. And I love that reveal is so lazy in Return of the Jedi.
I know.
Where I think that Yoda's like, oh, there is another, or someone says that. And then Luke's like, oh, yeah, wait, my sister's Leia. I got it. And it's like, wait, so you just pulled it out of thin air
so
here?
Did Darth Vader not know the whole time?
I guess no, he doesn't, because later on in the movie, he's like, oh, you have a twin, eh? And it's like, wait, what?
Darth Vader would be so much more likely to know that Leia was his daughter than Luke was his son.
I can guarantee you that there are comics or novels where it deals with this, but you don't want to get into this.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, and I'm sure they're full of Obi-Wan saying, from a certain perspective, you could imagine, if a moon is in Scorpio and if this lines
Darth
up
Vader
with this.
hit his head on a force rock, and it gave him amnesia, specifically of only the existence of Leia.
Oh my God.
Wait, isn't the thing supposed to be that in the prequels he thinks the children died because that's what's told to them, and that's why because he's not looking for them.
Also, didn't Anakin Skywalker build C-3PO? So, like,
Yes.
when he sees C-3PO hanging out with Leia, isn't he like, wait, what the fuck? What the fuck?
In the, what is it, the 9th movie? No, the 8th movie. Like, they erase...
Is that the Rise of Skywalker?
Yes, they erase C-3PO's memory, like, take it all away.
Right.
Wouldn't it have been cool if he's like, wait a minute, Darth Vader created me?
Right.
They don't even use that opportunity.
Right.
That's because, I don't know, like... The one big problem, and I do want to talk about Return of the Jedi, well, the one big problem of these movies, is that at this point in time, they don't want to create new things in the kind of like accepted canon. Back in the 90s and the 80s, you could create shit until the cows came home. No one cared. It's like, oh yeah, what was Boba Fett doing? Who cares? Mm-hmm. But like now, it's so locked down. No one wants to make any choice that may have any ramification because it's billions of dollars that are on the line, that we just get recycling of all this stuff over and over again. Remember when they made the Solo movie and the lesson they took away from it was they don't want to see new actors portray classic characters, so we will zombify them in these new movies.
Awful.
Yeah. What about Return of the Jedi? So you love Empire, you go to Return. What do you take away from?
Well, as a kid, I love Return too. You get to find out that Han lived after they put him in the cement.
Oh, did you think that he died?
I didn't think he died, but it's like, how's he going to get out of this one?
Mm-hmm. There's just a machine on the side. They hit a bunch of buttons and he falls right out. He's blind now.
Totally fine. Blind for like 5 minutes.
Now, did you get obsessed with Boba Fett?
No.
Really?
A lot of people did.
I was a Boba Fett kid. I was like, who is that cool guy who in these movies does nothing and gets taken out like a chump?
I was a little confused about the cult following around Boba Fett, honestly.
So you didn't see that scene where watching Empire, I forgot it was that short of all the bounty hunters where there's like a robot, there's like a lizard man.
I
There's
thought Boba Fett was offed pretty unceremoniously in Jedi.
in Return of the Jedi, just hit with like a stick. But you know, it's probably a ceremonial stick that was imbued with force powers. Because didn't you know that the robot that explodes and they get R2-D2 instead, that robot was a Jedi.
Oh, man.
Yeah, the expanded universe stuff, or Legends, I think it's called now. So it's not actually official. But you know, if you want to go into it, you can. But I would also suggest maybe watch other things too.
Yeah, I mean, I would say looking at these movies, whenever I look at them, I think these are perfectly fun, but it's a pretty thin soil to build a whole edifice on.
They have, though.
They have.
Yeah.
What can you say?
And people keep going towards it, and like generations have passed and they keep watching it. Like, is there a cutoff generation where kids will be like, well, we don't like Star Wars anymore?
Well, I do think it's interesting that in China, they never got the Star Wars movies.
And they cannot get like Star Wars in China to be hits, no matter how hard they've tried.
Throughout the 2010s, which was like a golden age of Hollywood blockbusters doing gangbusters in China, any piece of shit that Hollywood made that failed here would make $200 million in China.
Look, we're giving you Donnie Yen. Donnie Yen's in your Star Wars
and yet
movie.
Star Wars could not gain any traction at all. None of the recent Star Wars movies have done well, and in fact, they finally released A New Hope in China in the 2010s. They'd never seen it before, and they didn't like it. They were like, what's this primitive shit?
Well, so there you go. Are we, you know, the thesis we said at the beginning that if you release it now, people will just...
You see, I don't know, because I do know that
you know they gave them the special edition, too.
Yeah. When I was a kid in 1997 or whatever, watching Star Wars, I thought it was great. And maybe if you showed it to a kid right now, they would think it's great, too. But I do think art does not exist in a vacuum, and no matter how many special editions you do and how much refurbishing, there are a lot of external factors that play a role into whether or not it's received. So will future generations continue to love Star Wars? I don't know. I don't know.
But how do you feel about people holding on to Star Wars and basically making it like a defining part of their identity?
I am approaching it at this point really with more confusion than anything else.
Yeah.
Because I think... these movies are fun enough.
Yeah.
They're fun once a decade.
Yes.
In my opinion. No disrespect to anyone who loves these. I'm just a little confused. And I would ask, what do you as a 38-year-old or whatever
like take out of it
like every day of your life now? Yeah.
I mean, at some point it just comes down to they were children when they experienced this, and it moved them, and that's why they're holding on to it.
Yeah.
That's why they keep revisiting and looking for that hit.
And that's why they've hated everything made since 1983.
Yeah, because they're not kids when they're experiencing it.
Yeah, and so they see Jar Jar Binks and they're like, what's this fucking shit? And they're right. Well, it's shit.
I mean, I love Jar Jar.
Yeah.
But, you know, people, like, I met one of Emily's friends who she does comedy with, and this was not a joke. He was saying it with dead seriousness. He said, I think that Phantom Menace may be one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah.
And he's much younger than her. So
I've heard that about younger people. They love it.
That may also be because when Phantom Menace came out, it was very dominant during that period. That like you could not turn a corner without being like, I guess I'm going to have to play 100 hours of pod racing on N64.
Well, you know, The Force Awakens is still the highest grossing domestic release of all time.
Wow.
Which is impossible to imagine because I don't know anyone who thinks about it.
The Force Awakens?
Yeah.
Oh,
well,
I think about it all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, in the circles that you hang out, like me, when I talk to my friends, we know someone, we shall not name him. He's a huge Star Wars fan, that he consumes everything.
And does he love Force Awakens?
I think he likes Force Awakens. He, like me, loves Last Jedi and hates Rise of Skywalker.
Which is horrible.
Yeah, awful. What an awful movie. Time is only just like milk left out in the sun.
Yeah.
JJ is in director's jail. Like, you haven't heard from JJ.
Hope he stays there.
Yeah, forever. I have such a vivid memory of when The Force Awakens, he was doing interviews and he was so down on himself. And there was, for some reason, an interview he did with his wife, and his wife at one point tapped him on the shoulder. And this is during the first one, Force Awakens. And she said, I think that this is the best movie you've ever made. And he went, oh, wow, really? You think so? Well, thank you. She is not saying that when Rise of Skywalker came out. But yeah, like, he clearly loves this world, has lived in it long enough that he wants to keep revisiting it and going back.
JJ does.
No. The friend I'm talking about.
Your friend.
JJ wishes. He's like, please let me back on Star Wars. And they're like, no. Listen, we're talking about Peter Kapowski. We did a podcast together about Star Wars where he made us watch the Clone Wars. And but he is someone, though, that he loves it. He will consume any of the big stuff that comes out about it. But he is not obsessed or gets angry about, well, he gets angry if it's bad, but not in the way that I see, people out there in the world take it very seriously.
Nevertheless, I did enjoy, as somebody who has had a chip on my shoulder about these Star Wars things for a long time, for having killed the great 1970s cinema. For having,
can you imagine
for having made it so that it's illegal to make Heaven's Gate.
Heaven's Gate didn't have anything to do with that. Star Wars is the one that killed it.
I did enjoy the opportunity to revisit and think about these movies a little bit, and also try to have a little more empathy for them.
I mean, I love these movies. I think they're great, and I love watching them, but it just bothers me that they are all over the place, completely dominant, in a way that when I was a kid, it felt like Star Wars... It just existed forever. There was a million things I could experience. I could not touch it. But now when I see all this stuff, it's like, hey, look, Han Solo's back, and he's a zombie created by AI. And it's like, no, I don't want this. I don't want to revisit shitty recreations of the photos of me as a child. Give me something new. That's all I ask, something new.
Yeah.
But they're not going to give it to me. That is not the lesson that they're learning.
Did you like Andor?
I loved Andor. I thought it was great.
There's something new.
Yeah, made by someone who very vocally was like, yeah, I don't like those Star Wars movies. So maybe that's what needs to happen, is that someone very talented who can work in the world does their own thing. Did you hear that some of the Marvel movies are political thrillers, Will? Or some of them are heist films?
Winter Soldier is basically All the President's Men. It's true.
That explains why they have continued to go on, and they have not had a dip in quality at all. Our new Star Wars.
Well, there you have it. The Star Wars episode, almost 400 episodes in. We've done it. And now, do we have any letters?
Literally no one ever asked for a Star Wars episode, but we're giving it to them.
That's crazy that no one's asked for a Star Wars episode.
They know what we're going to say on it. I don't feel like we're going to come in.
I know what I'm going to say on it.
Yeah, but you were really harsh on the first one when you watched in 2021, and you said you were a little bit softer this time.
I was maybe a little too harsh, but like I say, it's not really my thing, and I came into it with a chip on my shoulder.
Well, I got my Star Wars tattoos, and I'm not getting rid of them. I walk into toy stores sometimes, and I see these $800 busts of some Star Wars character, and I stare at them and go, who is putting this in their home? If I walked in and I'm trying to think of a Peter Cushing bust of $800.
Well, if you saw a hole in them and put a fleshlight.
Oh, that's what they're doing with it?
That's what it's all about.
That makes complete sense now.
I mean, I'd rather it be Jar Jar, honestly.
I mean, listen, did I like Jar Jar when I saw Phantom Menace? No. Do I like him now? Yes.
Everyone likes an underdog.
Yeah, exactly. Listen, he is really our generation's Charlie Chaplin, doing all the slapstick and winning a war, also dooming the entire galaxy, I guess, was that one vote that he does.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, I say that. You haven't watched the prequels probably since they've come out, right? Well,
correct.
Okay. Do you think maybe you'll watch those and be like, there's a lot going on here?
There are people on Letterboxd who will tell you there are.
So you're not going for or against. All right. So our first letter is from Stein Eric Rutledal. It's a very long letter, and this actually came way back when we were doing International Month. But he actually outlines some Norwegian filmmakers that we should check out, specifically some women filmmakers. And I just want to discuss it a little bit because I am sure that you have never heard of these filmmakers, and maybe the listener hasn't either, and there's stuff to go explore there. For example, there is Edis Karlmar, Norway's first female director, who started a production company with her husband and then directed 10 films in 10 years. Her filmography is a mix of comedy farces and boundary-pushing dramas about social issues.
Wow.
You also have Anja Breyen, the first big female director from the New Wave generation with a film education from France. You're familiar with the Norwegian New Wave, right, Will?
I want to be familiar with everything.
She was noted for her realist style with long takes, deliberate slow pacing, and non-chronological storytelling. Her most noted work was a female remake of Cassavetes' Husbands called Wives, which ended up spawning a trilogy that revisited the characters every 10 years. And then we also have Wibeke Luckaberg, a model and actress who started out co-writing films that she starred in for her first husband, who was the most prominent Norwegian filmmaker of the New Wave generation. I need to know about this Norwegian New Wave. He was basically seen, I know that Stein is like, oh boy, he wants to learn about it. He's on our Discord. He's very nice. Any of these filmmakers, if you go on the Discord, perhaps will Stein throw a link towards you of films that maybe he subtitled himself? Maybe. So this filmmaker, he was basically seen as a messiah figure by his contemporaries, but after his third film was rejected by the Norwegian Film Board, he shockingly retired from filmmaking and returned to the theater. Vibeke had played the lead in both his films, but had grown frustrated with the sexual nature of the characters and the roles she was being offered as a result. They divorced in the early 70s, and she started making short films of her own before her feature debut, The Revelation, about a housewife whose life is upended when her husband has an affair. Camellia, Skin, and Seagulls are all period pieces showing unglamorous portrayals of dysfunctional families at the turn of the century. Especially Skin was controversial because of its portrayal of incest, but it played at the 1987 Cannes Film Festival. Her films were initially given harsh receptions in Norway, but have since been reclaimed, and she is now one of our most respected artists, although she has not made a feature film since 1991. All these filmmakers sound great. So
Norway month.
Yeah, Norway month. Don't give Stein the ammunition. Yeah.
But I would like to do some of these.
Yeah, because he actually once gave me a list of like, these are the Norwegian filmmakers you should check out. Just it was like dozens and dozens of films I have never heard of. So
wow.
I got this email, Stein, I know you're listening, and I just couldn't do it in the months where my wedding was happening. Will was moving. There was too much going on to dive into these filmmakers, but we will absolutely be getting to them in the new year. So thank you very much. Our next letter is from Juan, and it is titled More Godzilla. Well, I'm always happy to answer that question. Hey, Justin and Will. Still thankful y'all did a Godzilla episode way back, but I was curious about what y'all thought about other Godzilla, in quotes, movies. I'm talking about movies such as Godzilla Meets Bambi or Kozilla, the notorious Luigi Cozzi Godzilla film. The former has been ranked number 38 out of the top 50 animated movies by Jerry Beck, while the latter was, well, if you ever wanted actual footage of people dying in a Godzilla film, Kozilla is your chance. Curious about your thoughts, Juan.
Well, I'm glad Juan asked because I have seen Kozilla. Kozilla was the great Italian schlockmeister Luigi Cozzi
of Star Crash fame.
Took the original Godzilla, the Raymond Burr version, that is, Godzilla King of the Monsters, and then colorized it with a very primitive colorization process.
I believe it was gels in front of the, or something like that.
It's more mood coloring than anything, and also added a lot of strange music, and then added actual footage of after the dropping of the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And I think that last edition in particular is pretty tasteless because, among other things, look, I don't want to see that in a Godzilla movie.
Yeah.
Actual atrocity footage, but also it makes the subtext text in a way that's very kind of trashy and tasteless. That said, you know, if you're a Godzilla fan, you got to see it once.
We'll do a Patreon episode on it one day. I guarantee that.
And Bambi Meets Godzilla?
Of course we've seen it, because it was at the beginning of Godzilla 1985.
I've seen it many times.
Many times, yes. It's fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's one joke.
Yeah. Well, let me dissect it in this 20-page essay that I have about, you know, how Godzilla, or maybe even Japan during the time of its making, were encroaching on the U.S. manufacturing side, as seen in the very...
Gung-ho.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
I knew it. I can read your mind. Look at this. We're like an old married couple.
But yeah, Bambi vs. Godzilla, loved it when I saw it. It even played at the drive-in when we went to go see the Godzilla movie. They had a print of Bambi vs. Godzilla.
That's right. I saw Bambi vs. Godzilla on shimmering 35mm film.
Yep. I don't think we'll be doing a Patreon episode about that.
Not much to talk about.
Listen, we've got to cover everything.
That's right. We're going to cover every movie.
And so thank you very much for that letter. You also asked, what do you think of the Godzilla shows and movie? I know you haven't seen the new one.
Godzilla -1. I'm going to see it this week, hopefully.
And I think when he says show, he may be mentioning the Monarch show that's on Apple TV right now, which I know you haven't watched.
I haven't watched that. I mean, or is he talking about like Godzilla the animated series?
Wait, so
with Godzuki?
Yeah, with Godzuki. Or maybe he's talking about the actually pretty okay Godzilla animated series that was based on the Matthew Broderick version of the...
Which I saw a few episodes of, yeah.
Or maybe he's talking about, which I know Will has not seen, the movie kind of animated ones where it's in the post-apocalypse or Netflix films.
Right, which I want to see. I want to see.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not that great, right?
Yeah, well, you know what? They have some big defenders. There are movies where Godzilla does not show up until the end, which I think is unacceptable for animated movies. And then there was also a really weird Godzilla show called Godzilla Singular Point, and it was an anime movie. And the only thing that I would get Will to maybe cast an eye towards it is that Jet Jaguar is very present in it. But he's a weird-looking Jet Jaguar. He's like a boxy redesign of him. But he's throughout the entire series, and it was one of the first times in kind of like, you know, important mainstream Godzilla media that he became very present again, which then led to like a lot of toys of him being made. Which, I mean, this is kind of back matter stuff, but isn't it great that like Toho, someone finally got hired and they're like, we could be making money off of this Godzilla stuff?
I love it.
That like for years, Toho's like, we don't want to go into the North American market because if we do cheap stuff there, it'll cut into the Japanese market. So like we want to make everything as inaccessible as possible or very weirdly released in like, what, this is what you're giving us? But now that Godzilla website, you could get a shirt with Manila in the like wolf pattern from like the famous like wolf shirt. But I gotta say, not enough Manila toys, and I want ugly Manila. Give me that, please.
I got Justin a small Manila action figure for his wedding.
I very much appreciate it. It's right by my computer right now, just to remind me every time I sit down what I'm doing this all for. Manila. And I remember looking when we talked about it recently, or maybe after we went to the drive-in, like, are there any Titanosaurus toys?
Oh, I love him.
Or are there even any toys of, what's the name? Gabara.
Godzilla's Revenge.
Yeah, and the man who wrote Tokyo Scope responded to that and be like, yeah, they're not really available. They're really hard to get. We need 1 million Gabara toys. Get it out there.
I want, one of those big busts you were talking about of Gabara.
And I want to hit him, and he makes that like engine starting noise, like, yeah, would love that. We're getting there. When we'll, 5 years from now, we'll be talking about Godzilla like we talk about Star Wars, and be like, oh, there's too much Godzilla. Like, can't we move on to something else? But we're not quite there yet. All right, well, thank you everybody who sent letters. And next week, we're going to talk about Nancy Myers.
That's right. The queen of the rom-com. That's Big Sember, right?
Yeah. I mean, she's the Stanley Kubrick of the rom-com.
That's right. $130 million budgets, baby.
And it's all up there on screen.
And I don't know if how many have I seen? I've
seen The Holiday.
No, I haven't. I've seen Something's Gotta Give. So we're going to watch some classic Nancy.
The Intern.
I've not seen The Intern.
Okay.
I can't wait to see it. They're all long too, aren't they?
They're all very long.
All
yes.
right. Hey, I'm going to hang out with my buds, Bobby and Jack and Anne Hathaway.
You're going to have so much fun with these bad boys. So that's what we're doing next week. Until then, I'm Justin DeClue.
I'm Will Sloan.
Thanks for listening. Remember, we are trying to hit 850 patrons by the end of the month. So if you are not a patron yet, join, because there's so much fun content to be found, especially stuff coming up in December. Boy, we have some fun plans for any Patreon subscriber. But I would still like to thank some of our new patrons, who include Benjamin J. Hendrick, Neil Mac Giola Chomgale, Devin Border, Nikki, Tyler Gosnell, Sam Hackney, Axel Steele, Aaron Pickadash, Rod Lott, Nick, Damian A. Thorne, Richard Wellens, Kemble McClure, Joel J. Lohman, Joshua Painter, and Michael Starrett. Thank you very much for becoming patrons. We could not keep doing it without you. And remember, if you are a patron into January, I will read every name of every single patron that is currently subscribed. So make sure to join now so you will be on that very, very long and exhaustive for me list.
I do have a special announcement, a little bit of a plug. I released a brand new zine. It's on...
You call it a zine, but...
It's basically a book.
It's a book,
It's 100 pages.
Yep.
It's got a spine and everything, but it's the spirit of a zine. It's called the Journal of Stoogeological Studies, an unauthorized Three Stooges fanzine. And Justin DeClue is a contributor contributor. I am the editor. So it's basically an Important Cinema Club production.
There's a transcript of one of the episodes we did on the Three Stooges, and reading it, I'm like, this is really funny. We're funny.
Yeah, so there's a discussion that we had about the Three Stooges meet Hercules, as well as a variety of articles about all facets of Stooge.
There's so much good stuff. There's a deep dive into Three Stooges meet Hercules.
Yeah, Justin wrote an article about the Shemp Howard film Crazy Nights. There are articles about the most essential Three Stooges shorts and the sort of the weirdest ones too.
And we also have some heavy hitters in there, because who did you interview, Will?
So I interviewed Drew Friedman, the great artist, who has done so much incredible Stooge art about his relationship with the Stooges.
And after Will interviewed him, like a week or so later, there was suddenly a new Drew Friedman Curly Joe drawing, and I was like,
Did I inspire
Did you
it?
inspire? Did
Maybe.
you talk about Curly Joe when you talked?
Yeah, we did.
Wow, so maybe you led Drew Friedman to bringing Curly Joe to life again.
But then another big get, Guy Madden, the great Canadian filmmaker, the director of My Winnipeg, Brand Upon the Brain, Saddest Music in the World, many other classics. Guy Madden very, very kindly sat with me and discussed the Three Stooges, because he also incorporates the Three Stooges into his art.
That's why you reached out, because you saw that he was doing Three Stooges art.
Yeah, and he was more than happy to talk about it. And I'm just so tickled, so thrilled to have Guy Madden talking about the Three Stooges in my zine.
Well, something like this, Will, was probably going for what, $30, $40?
It's going for about $5 US, a little less actually, about $6.50 or so Canadian, and that's the lowest price I could put it at, because I put out a call for submissions. I'm sure people listening to this now have contributed. I got a lot of wonderful submissions by people who volunteered their time and labor, and given that, I don't think I can really. I'm not gonna.
Will is a rich man. He needs no more money. He just wants to bring the joy of Stooges to everyone.
Here's the thing: I do the Patreon for money, but I do the Stooge Zine for love, and I also do the Patreon for love.
Yeah, that's right.
So please do keep subscribing.
And I want people to know there are 2 comic strips original for the zine about Ted Healy.
2 Ted Healy comics.
Ted Healy comics.
Can you believe that? So
doesn't he go to hell in both of them?
One's called The Violent World of Ted Healy, and the other one is, well, I'm not going to spoil it, but you're going to want to read these comics.
So if you're a Three Stooges fan, even a Three Stooges curious, we expect you to pick this up. Bring Will to #1 on those Amazon charts.
I think it's gettable, especially at this price.